folks. We're just going to let everybody log in here for a couple minutes. Thank you for joining us tonight for this very timely and important town hall, Make Revera Public. There's no room for profit in long-term care. So it's hosted by us, the Manitoba Health Coalition, as well as PSAC, which is the Public Service Alliance of Canada Prairie Region. And we're going to have folks coming into the webinar as we go through. So in the interest of time and to get this conversation going, I'm going to start us off tonight with a land acknowledgement. So today we have people from across Canada, Indigenous territories joining us in this webinar. Folks are located across multiple First Nations, Inuit, Métis territory, numbered treaties, and unceded territory. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the harms of the past and a dedication throughout our work to moving forward toward justice, reconciliation, in our context today, public health care access and equity. So for folks who don't know me, my name is Brianne Gertson, and I'm the Provincial Director of the Manitoba Health Coalition. I'm very honored to hold that position. I'm also a community activist, organizer, and researcher. In addition to my work here at the MHC, I currently sit on the board of the Child Care Coalition of Manitoba, Childcare Now, and I serve as the Vice Chair on the Steering Committee of the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives Manitoba. I hold an Honours BA and a Master's degree, and I currently serve as a school trustee representing Ward 3 in River East Transcona School Division. So thank you very much for joining us tonight. And to give you a little bit of an overview, we will be taking audience questions towards the end of the webinar. Fear not, there's a significant portion of the night tonight to take your questions, hear your concerns, and to hear the perspectives of the panelists that we have with us tonight. Just to let you know, we would like to foster a very safe and welcoming environment here tonight. So please consider that every time you submit a question, as well as if you indulge into the chat function as well to introduce yourself. There's going to be a lot of big emotions here tonight. This is not an easy topic to talk about for a number of panelists here and for all of us immersed in what's happening during this pandemic as it relates to healthcare and how it relates to our personal care homes in the province during this pandemic. And so I just want everybody to remind themselves that we need to be patient with each other, we need to be kind with each other, and we really need to listen and hear each other out while we navigate these very troubling times and seek positive change to ensure that this never happens again. And so to begin with us tonight, we have Marianne Hoodlin, is the Regional Executive Vice President for the Public Service Alliance of Canada and the Prairies. She's occupied the position since 2012, and if you've gone to any rallies, I'm sure you have seen Marianne there. She has been an active PSAC member for over 20 years, and having held various positions on committees, bargaining teams, including her component, Agricultural Union, the Prairie Region Council before being elected REVP, National CFIA, and PA bargaining teams, as well as 26 regional bargaining units. So to say that Marianne has experience would be an understatement, and we're very honored to have her here tonight. And we're also excited to also say that PSAC Prairie Region is also a proud coalition partner here with MHC. And so I'm going to hand it over to Marianne to give you a little bit of background on Rivera and as it relates to PSAC, the pension fund, and some other details that she'll be sharing with you tonight. So Marianne, feel free to take it away.
Great. Thank you so much. Oh, there we go. This is what happens when they make me in charge of the screen. It gets a little confusing. So first of all, I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. You know, there's a lot going on. People are focused on their own, you know, trying to keep it together, their own mental health. But you know, what we're talking about tonight is something that we all need to know about. It's something that we all need to care about. It's something that's going to touch us all in a different way, as Brianne said. This whole issue is about the safety and security of our seniors and the well-being of seniors. And I don't care who you are, that's going to touch you, whether it's family, it's friends. This is really what's at stake in this issue. So, you know, when the first wave of COVID hit and it was ravaging through long-term care homes, particularly in Quebec and Ontario, I think we all, in Manitoba and the prairies, we watched in horror. Our hearts broke for the families who couldn't do anything but just sit back and watch this happen. And they didn't know if the care home, if their loved ones were being cared for, what the long-term care operators were doing. Were they trying to stop the spread? What were they doing to support those who contracted it? And out of all of this, there was one name that stood out, and it was Rivera. Now, I'll be honest, I had heard of Rivera a few years ago. Because of a prolonged strike in Edmonton. And it was Alberta Union of Public Employees, represented employees at a Rivera care home in Edmonton. And through all of this, I remembered I actually was on their picket line. So I don't just do protests in Manitoba. I was on that picket line. And what the issue was, a living wage, fair wages, and actually respect for the work that they were doing, respect for the fact that they are providing day-to-day care for our seniors. So you can't get much more frontline than that. You can't get much more personal. But being in a for-profit, their wages were nowhere in line with the public sector. And so, it was around that time that I found out that Rivera is actually a wholly owned subsidiary of the PSP Investments, so Public Service Pension Investment, which is under the Public Sector Pension Investment Board, which is actually a federal crown corporation. So PSPC Investments manages about $169 billion of pension funds for federal employees, unionized and unrepresented, members of the RCMP and the Canadian Armed Forces. And as a union that represents the majority of federal employees, we are actually legally prevented from being on the board of the investment, but that hasn't stopped us from raising concerns about treatment of staff and about residents. So I could sit here and give you all kinds of numbers and statistics around long-term care and for-profit and for private and all that other stuff. We have experts who can give you that later. So I'm going to put this in perspective. Me personally, as of this month, have been paying into the federal superannuation plan for 34 years. Yes, I'm that old. 34 years I've been paying into that. My pension contribution purchased all these little long-term care homes and actually built an entirely autonomous corporation called Rivera. My pension plan owns Rivera in Canada, the US, and the UK. 6 Rivera homes in Alberta, 8 in Manitoba. It is my pension plan administrator who is prioritizing profit over the well-being of seniors in their care, and profit over recognizing the value and the dedication of the workers that go to work every day to provide that care. So I have to tell you, as a Manitoban, it was absolute shock and horror to see what was going on in the Rivera homes, particularly Parkview and the Maples. And, I sat there watching a news conference where a Rivera manager lied to the regional health authority, saying that they had full staffing, full nursing staff, and they were only short 2 healthcare aides. They lied to the regional health authority. They lied to Manitobans and said that they were basically fully staffed. And this was on a night when it got so bad that 911 was called and paramedics had to come in because the healthcare staff was completely overwhelmed and could not deal with the acute cases. That is not acceptable. And the next day, and I'm going to say it, the provincial minister of health lied. He lied and said he didn't know about it until he heard about what happened on the Friday. I know for a fact that family members had been trying to contact him. He had been tweeted, he had received emails, he had phone calls to his office. I know that for a fact. Do not tell me that you did not know what was going on in those homes. So, you know, through all of this, I'm sitting here going, this is my pension plan. You know, so should I be happy that my pension investments have a good return on investment? Hell no. That to me does not negate what they've done. So, you know, on behalf of PSAC, we have 140,000 members who are paying into superannuation. So we are contributing into that plan. And we are calling on the government as the largest union paying into that plan to force PSP Investments to transfer these long-term care homes to the provinces into a provincial jurisdiction, that they should be publicly delivered. And, you know, again, there's all kinds of numbers and stats on, you know, what makes more sense. This isn't about numbers and staff. I want to know what the ethical standards are for the investment of my pension plan. When I buy an RSP, I get to select and I get to say, no, I do not support this type of organization. I will take a lesser rate of return, making sure that there's that ethical standard. Where's the ethical standard? And so, you know, we'll do the call to action later, but we're calling on the government to take accountability for this. This is the federal government. There is multiple links in this chain, right from the board of Rivera that was appointed by PSP Investments. Then you go to the investment board, which is a crown corporation, which reports to a minister, which is the government. And every link in that chain takes us back to the federal government. So when all of the first wave was going on, and now we're seeing it across the country, particularly huge issues at these private care homes. Both the Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance have said nothing is off the table. If that's what national standards are, nothing is off the table. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you we have it all figured out and we know how that's going to happen, because honestly, I have no idea how they would do that, but I know they can if they want to. And that's something that we have to work through. So, you know, we as federal public service workers, and I'm talking to all of my members, retirees, we have to stand up now. We have to stand up and say, we are not going to be responsible for this. We will hold them accountable, and we need to start asking questions, and the time is now. And so I know we'll hear more from some of the other speakers. That is why we as a national union support organizations like the Manitoba Health Coalition that is fighting for a seniors advocate and fighting for these things. That's why we will always stand with other unions that represent healthcare workers, because this didn't need to happen. And we have the capacity to make sure it never happens again. Thank you.
Thank you, Marianne. Yeah, lots of folks have just come to light about the pension ties to Rivera, and I think it also needs to be noted that the government is looking to infuse hundreds of millions of dollars into long-term care, and we should really be talking about how we're investing that money and where the accountability is and which system we're actually supporting federally here in the provinces as well. And this topic is very layered, and there's different perspectives within it. You have the frontline workers who are providing the care to the residents, and you have those residents who are receiving that care. And some of I get a lot of folks phoning me and sharing their personal stories with me. And I'm honored to be able to hear their stories, but it also not just breaks my heart as a Manitoban, but as a person, that families here in Manitoba are going through what they're going through in these personal care homes, and the workers are being pushed to limits I don't think we've ever imagined before. And I know for many years, lots of organizations have been calling for staffing ratios, increased legislated staffing ratios for workers to residents, which means and results in, for folks who aren't familiar, it means more money to ensure that we have more staffing to take care of the residents on the floor, to provide the care that they deserve and that they should and we should be providing them as Manitobans and as Canadians and as people. And so we're going to take the conversation, and this is going to be a lived experience, and this is Karen. Karen is a dedicated community member who will be sharing her mother-in-law's experience at Maples Rivera long-term care home. And we crossed paths because of MHC's position for calling for a Manitoba seniors advocate. And part of a seniors advocate role is ensuring that they have investigative powers to look at the whole of seniors care and the way we treat older adults systemically. So we can actually have meaningful research reports that are independent from the legislature. So that means they're free from political interference of governments of the day, so that we actually see a clear picture of what's happening on the ground, and we make sure that our policy is navigated in to ensure that it's addressing what's coming out of our older adult care, as well as providing the resources and supports that folks who are looking to become residents of personal care homes, as well as their families and caregivers, so they have somewhere to go to in a centralized way that's listening to them. And so Karen has crossed my path, and she shared her story, and I think it's a really important story to share. And she has so graciously accepted our invitation to present tonight. So I'm going to hand it over to Karen to share her family's experience. So Karen, whenever you're ready, you can just go right ahead, okay?
Okay, thank you, Brianne. I want to thank everybody for inviting me to be part of tonight's discussion. My mother-in-law, Brenda Gregory, she entered the Maples Care Home early October, and everything appeared, very well there. They advised that they would be, testing her right away for COVID and influenza to make sure that she didn't have either, and they both came back negative, and she even had to isolate for a while during her first part of the stay there. And even within that time, I mean, we made sure she had a phone in her room, so that was installed. And she did at times make mention of that the treatment wasn't that great and certain things weren't, I guess, what she had expected. And we thought maybe it was just, an adjustment period. And my partner, Lance, her son, had attended there and visited with her and had discussions with her. And even when he was there, he did mention to me as of late that he recalls, that there seemed to be more residents than staff. So that kind of, speaks to that staff shortage that was talked about. But and then the last time he was there on the 19th, he visited with her. Everything appeared to be okay. And then on the 20th, we got the first email about positive tests of COVID and that they had suspended any visitations to come to the home. So there wasn't anything we could do. We couldn't go there. We kept getting emails. The emails implied that everything was under control, everybody was safe, and everybody was well looked after. And, you trust that. You trust when you get that information. Towards the end of the month, about the 28th, my stepson had called her and spoke with her for a while, and she advised us that, she did sound a little raspy, but, it could be maybe just tired or a little stressed. But on the 2nd, one of the siblings, Lance's brother, had called, and she advised that she'd been sitting in her own urine. Nobody had come to see her. No one was taking care of her. And it was decided that, paramedics would be called. We couldn't get any response. Nobody was responding to Lance's emails or phone calls. He couldn't raise anybody. The paramedic arrived there, and I think either a nurse or a healthcare aide had telephoned Lance, asked if his mom had called the paramedics, and Lance advised, no, we can't get a hold of anybody, what's going on? And, she sounded stressed and said, I was going to get to your mom, but I'm one person to 60 residents, which was shocking to hear, that one person had to take care of that many. She asked if we wanted to speak to the paramedic. We did. He said he didn't deem her hospital worthy at the time, but that it appeared that she had been suffering with flu-like symptoms for the last 3 days. We were never told that. Nobody informed us of that from Rivera at all in any of those emails we got. They said that they were going to test her, and the Wednesday, we found out that she was positive for COVID, and that she was still stable. They would keep her there. She wasn't eating, but she was still taking fluids and everything, and appeared to be okay at the time. But by the next morning at 5 o'clock in the morning, we got the call that they were sending her off to Grace Hospital. It was not looking good. And we spoke, right? The hospital phoned us, let us know that it wasn't looking good already. And by that afternoon, we were already prepared, told to, it wasn't turning the corner as they'd hoped, and that it's possible that we might just have to make her comfortable. And by Friday morning, we got that call that there was nothing more they could do. And on that, to backtrack, on the Thursday, we did kind of rush together to have a quick FaceTime with her. That's all we could do. Weren't allowed to go to the hospital. It's tough to see somebody go through that. And still say, she said to us, I'm going to fight the COVID, I'll be strong. And you're sitting there knowing that she's not going to come out of this. And the following Friday, when we got that call, I rushed home from work to be with Lance, and he had one last FaceTime with her. And at this point, she wasn't conscious anymore. They had, made her comfortable, and, she was quite heavily medicated so that she probably wasn't, we hope she wasn't feeling any pain. But the body is still fighting. And I'll tell you, it's the worst thing you'll ever see in your life. Someone dying from COVID. It's someone you love, and you can't even be there. And it took 12 hours, and she passed away that evening. It just went so absolutely quick. And that wasn't, Maples wasn't even our first choice. It was just temporary. We were going to have her closer to home, and it's not that we didn't love her. We loved her very much and tried every other avenue, but you should be able to trust these homes when, that they're to take care of your loved ones. And, it was a month and she was gone. Just like that. It's still a little surreal, and I hold nothing against the staff. I have a feeling they were ultimately traumatized in all of this, and hung out to dry, I think. And we just don't really know what went on in there. I believe that they were entirely negligent. They hid from the truth. I don't know why they would possibly do that, except for, their bottom line being the dollar. They put money ahead of our families, and we need to remove that for profit, because with for profit, you lose sight of the real purpose of these homes. And, the human aspect of these homes gets lost in their priorities. And it really needs to come back to a provincial level. It needs to be run by, our health authorities here, because this, finding out from afterwards with the whistleblower there, if it wasn't for that, we may not have known all these things. And I'm thankful to whoever that was. As sad as it is to know that maybe your loved one wasn't, that Rivera didn't, do their duty. You don't know really what went on in there. I've heard stories and it's heartbreaking. And the one way I'll end this, I guess, the one positive we have is that she at least passed away in the hospital with some care and dignity, and not, some of them passed away in their own beds. And again, I want to reiterate, the staff, I think, was left, they weren't helped either, and probably were in fear of to say anything. And that's a tragedy all around I think for all of us. And I think we all need to come together on this issue. And hopefully we can make some meaningful changes when it comes to our personal care homes here in Manitoba.
Thank you, Karen.
You're welcome.
And again, I want to express our deepest condolences to you and your family.
Thank you.
And all the families impacted who may be on this call from COVID, from personal care homes and mistreatment, or this virus is very nefarious. And to see people taken so fast and alone, there's a lot of pain and suffering that's happening in Manitoba right now. So I know it takes a lot of courage to share your personal stories, especially something that has just recently happened. So again, thank you for sharing, and send our best to Lance as well.
I definitely will.
So thank you. So I'm just going to do still lots of big emotions were happening. So we're going to feel those right now. Whew. And so to kind of give me that little bit of a break, and I think for us to collect ourselves a little bit, I'll give a little housekeeping that I missed in this conversation. There's Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. You can hover around it, you'll see it. You can put your questions in. I'm sure there are questions happening now, so feel free to put them in there so we're able to ask our panelists those later on tonight. For those who are joining us by phone, welcome. We know you're there, so thank you for phoning in. If you did have a question for our panelists, you are welcome to please text the following phone number. So it's 204-292-0585. So again, 204-292-0585. So now I am very pleased to be able to introduce to you tonight Shannon McAteer. She has been exceptionally busy. And so Shannon, thank you for joining us. I'm going to read your bio here, but I did before wanted to really express, because I know how busy you have been. And so for you to make the time for us tonight means a lot to all of us here who are going to hear you speak in a couple of minutes. And so folks who aren't familiar with Shannon, she's actually been a labor activist for 26 years. She has worked as an admin assistant at Health Sciences prior to working full-time for CUPE in 2006. She has held many positions within CUPE, including elected officer, secretary, executive assistant, and national staff rep. Currently, she is the healthcare coordinator for CUPE in Manitoba and a national staff representative. Supporting the members from all locals and healthcare across Manitoba, it is her primary role by assisting with labor relations, community liaisoning, and negotiations. Shannon was born and raised in Gimli, Manitoba, and currently resides in Winnipeg with her teenage daughter and her mother. Shannon has been hard at work and has been out on the front lines for a while, as you can hear from her bio. And so I'm going to hand it over to Shannon to share her story with us tonight. So Shannon, you can go ahead when you're ready.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brianne. And Karen, I just wanted to also say thank you for sharing your story. Much like Brianne, I found I was getting very emotional. So our condolences to you and your family and to all the families that are going through this throughout the system in Manitoba right now. And absolutely. And thank you to the Manitoba Health Coalition for organizing this and the Alliance for inviting us to participate. I appreciate that very much. Absolutely. CUPE represents staff at the private for-profit, and there's a distinction that I'll explain in a bit, personal care homes in Manitoba, including the Rivera homes and some at extended care as well. So we've got the healthcare aides, the dietary staff, housekeeping, recreation, the support staff is who CUPE represents throughout the system. And we've been hearing from our members for goodness, years actually, not just COVID. There was a crisis in healthcare in staffing, in regards to staffing, long before COVID ever came, sadly. And as an example, the Maples Personal Care Home back in 2013, they were already raising this. They went and had an information picket. They hit the streets, they had a big party on the street, and they were trying to raise awareness of the concerns and the staffing levels that are it was already a crisis. And CUPE also has been raising that for many, many months. So Karen's right. The staff are absolutely traumatized by the conditions that they're having to work in. I think traumatized is it's a sad word, but it's a good word. It kind of describes the feeling. So I'm going to step back for a bit and talk a bit more about the, kind of the long-term care issues in a bigger picture scenario. And then I'll talk a bit more and get into with the staff and stuff, if that's all right. So, as I said, the staffing issues have been an issue for many, many years. And the staff do work incredibly hard. They're very committed staff that work because it's certainly not because they're making, top-notch wages. It's because they're committed to the care. And many of them also have family members who are in personal care homes. So they have members who are also family members, who are part of the system and who they have to care for as well. So the government has, and the Minister of Health, and I'm going to get to what Marianne said about him lying because I got a few things to say about that too. So they have what they call, it's 3.6 hours of care. So I just wanted to explain that a little bit because a lot of people believe that that's like a staffing ratio. It's not. It's just connected to funding, and it says that per resident, there's to be 3.6 hours of care, and care encompasses everything from, getting someone out of bed to feeding them to providing medications, anything that has to be done for each resident. And it's going to vary resident to resident. And it's supposed to be 3.6 hours. So that includes the nursing staff, the support staff, recreation, any kind of care. It can be from all levels of staff, doctors, everything. So that we believe, and we've been advocating for a long time now, that is not enough. In fact, back in June, CUPE sent a letter to the Minister of Health. So this is where it gets to he's lying that he didn't know, because we personally sent a letter saying, hey, before the second wave hits that everybody was talking about, there's a crisis and you need to get prepared and we need to get ahead of it so we don't get into the situation that we saw Ontario and Quebec go through. We didn't want that to happen here. So we received a thank you very much for your letter, and that was it. That was the only response that we got to that letter. And so, of course, that's very disheartening and very concerning. And then for him to come out and say, well, I didn't know until, this came to light, that is completely false, completely. And it's them trying to, shove off responsibility. Now, I do believe that the CEO for the WRHA, when she came on the news and said, I didn't know, they lied to us. I do believe that because I believe that she was given false information and Rivera provided false information, and they knowingly provided that false information. And so that just kind of speaks, I think, to the kind of company that we're dealing with. And that kind of segues us into the issues with for-profit personal care homes. So we have what we call public personal care homes here in Manitoba that fall under the envelope of the WRHA. So their standards and everything is managed by the WRHA. So it's a different standard and a different type of facility that you would have. When you get into for-profit care, it becomes about the profit. It's not about the care, and Marianne had spoken to that a little bit herself, but it does become about the bottom line. It becomes about the shareholders who are investing, and I it was news to me as well, and to many of us in CUPE, that Rivera was owned by the pension plan. So this is all, many enlightening things have come. Unfortunately, it's taken a horrible situation to bring all this information to light. So, and the for-profit impacts the delivery of care, because the companies, these for-profit companies, will provide the minimal amount of staffing that they can get away with, because that affects their bottom line. And you'll see it in regards to everything. I think Karen had mentioned that the healthcare aide had said that she was one healthcare aide for 60 residents. Now, that's appalling and terrifying. And unfortunately, it was happening more than just that horrible night. That horrible night just happened to be the night that somebody from the outside, the paramedic, came in and said, "Hey, I'm not staying quiet about this." Staff had been bringing their concerns forward, saying, we're understaffed, we're stressed. This is what's happening. And Rivera didn't, there was no response really from Rivera. They didn't do anything. They didn't try to address it. Nothing until after that horrible night where the story came out from the paramedic. So it absolutely, if the WRHA had been in control or had been in charge more, we wouldn't be in this situation, because there's more resources, there's more ability to manage, and there's more oversight. So that was the first thing that, when it came to light, that CUPE and the other unions as well were calling for, the inquest, the review, get in there, WRHA, and see what's going on. And if that was the norm, if the WRHA was in charge of these for-profit homes, then I think we would take away that for-profit aspect, and that would certainly help in terms of the staffing levels and the care that the staff are able to provide to the residents. So I want to talk a bit about that horrible night that hit the media. So after that night, of course, it hit the news really quickly, and the staff were calling the staff rep, and they were calling us and saying, they lied. That's not true. That information, there was not. So what we understand is there's the capacity for 200 residents at Maples Personal Care Home. They weren't at full capacity for sure, but they had said that their staffing was full capacity. It was not by any stretch. So when Rivera came out and said that, the employees felt they were very hurt and betrayed by their own employer, because they're struggling. The emotional, physical and psychological toll that this pandemic is having on them, it cannot be described, because the residents that they care for, people that they do care, they care about the residents, that they have relationships with them. They want to be able to do the extras and the nice, and sit and visit and do all that. They just do not have time. And I think Karen had mentioned how the healthcare was saying, "I'm sorry, I wanted to get to your mom, but I had 45 that I wasn't able to get to her." And that, unfortunately, we hear all too much. The healthcare aides, in particular, because they do the frontline care, they're desperately trying to do their jobs and do it appropriately and be there for the residents, but they're burning out. They're scared. They're in tears. They're working overtime. They, working double shifts. They're drained, and they need some help, and they need some support. And that is what we've been trying to advocate and fight for. And we believe that if the WRHA was, in charge, that would certainly help and would certainly go a long way for supporting the staff as well. Of course, CUPE took to Twitter after that night, which is what we believe led to them fessing up that they were lying, because the staff were calling them out. Everybody was calling them out and saying that is not true information. So the fact that a corporation could lie to the government is just appalling. It's appalling, and it's unacceptable. I think that's what Marianne said, and we absolutely agree. So CUPE is absolutely supportive of for-profit homes being taken over, being run, whatever terminology you want to use, but we want to see some better oversight at the very minimum into these for-profit homes. And I'm just going to double check. And the other thing that's been a big struggle this whole pandemic for the frontline workers is the personal protective equipment, the masks, the gowns, I think people hear in the media a lot about an N95 mask. And what that is it's got a bit of a respirator in it. So it's got a bit of a filter, whereas just the surgical or the paper masks, as people would know them, don't have that. They're just basically, a paper mask over your face. So staff have been fighting, and we've been desperately trying to get them, and we filed grievances, and we've been successful in getting the N95s, but it shouldn't be a battle, and it's a battle to get basic, and stopping the spread of this virus is very much connected to having appropriate PPE. So that's also been a concern. So, the staff are concerned about getting the virus, giving it to the residents, taking it home to their families. So they've got all this pressure, and they're working disgustingly short often. So we believe the government has absolutely failed the seniors and our most vulnerable population in this pandemic, and we'd like to see some change.
Yeah, thank you, Shannon, for that overview. And thank you to all the workers that you folks represent in those homes who are showing up every day and doing the very tough work. And I think, yeah, our government has failed in so many different ways, and this situation was avoidable. And it's a failure on our health minister's part and our premier to recognize what was a long-standing issue in regards to personal care homes. And as you so perfectly put, in regards to the chronic understaffing and underfunding that has been taking place in personal care homes. It is appalling, and they knew about it. And additionally, our health minister went on record saying that they were conducting virtual visits, and that's good enough. And so I think there were a lot of checkpoints within this particular situation that could have been avoided if our government just listened to our frontline workers and the families of residents who were so loudly vocalizing the problems with receiving communication from Rivera in the first place when this was all unfolding. And the PPE, I do want to make mention of, because I get this a lot. Oh, we're still talking about PPE, and it's like, yes, everybody is still fighting for PPE access. And so I think whichever capacity we all have and keeping pushing for that is what we need to continue to do, in addition to these larger issues that need to be resolved. But to say that we're still fighting for PPE access now within this pandemic, and as long as we've been dealing with this pandemic, it is absolutely shameful, to be quite frank. And with that, I do want to bring Marianne back into this conversation. And what Marianne's going to do next is we're going to quickly just go over some of the action items, just in case anybody needs to leave the webinar to attend to their own personal lives. I know I have a 6-year-old sleeping. Let's hope that continues on. And so we all have those challenges in our own personal homes. So for those who do need to leave early, Marianne's just going to go over some of the different calls to action that you can take now to make your voices heard on different levels of government. So Marianne, if you wanted to kind of take it away, and if you need me to jump in at all, just let me know.
Perfect. Thank you. So first of all, I want to say thank you to Sharon and to Karen. Obviously, thank you for sharing your story. You make me all emotional again. But that's what this issue is about, right? So we have two choices. We can spend an hour and a half together. We can hear about the issues. We can offer condolences to Karen and her family and all the other families. We could say to Shannon and her members, we value you, and then we can go about our lives. Or we can say, no, that's not good enough, and it's time to do something about it. And, sometimes in situations like this, people say, well, it's really overwhelming. What can I do? My one little voice is not going to make a difference. You know what? Every voice is going to make a difference. So, we have been calling on the federal government, particularly for PSAC members, to make Revera public. So there's two ways to do it. Through PSAC, we've set up, and I think you'll get the links after, a way where you can go in and you type in your name and your email and your phone number and your postal code, and guess what? This system will actually phone your MP's office for you. So you don't have to figure it out. It will actually call your representatives. And, it's your right as a constituent, either federally, provincially, municipally, to talk to the people that represent you in the bodies that actually have the ability to affect change in our community. They are accountable to us. as being elected to represent us. And so if you're comfortable with that, you can go in and use the system to make a phone call. Or if you prefer, you can go onto the Canadian Health Coalition website, and they've set up an email. So same thing, you enter in your name and your email address, and they will actually send a letter to Finance Minister Freeland and Treasury Board President Jean Duclos and your MP, and basically saying that, you know, you need to fix this. We need to figure out how to make this happen. You can go in there, you can change the letter if you want to add personal, you can do that anytime. And a plug for the Manitoba Health Coalition that has been front and center during everything we've been going through lately. You can support the Manitoba Health Coalition with contacting your MLA, for those of you in Manitoba, to really push this government to establish a seniors advocate. Because at the end of the day, as I was watching this all unfold, you know, we could have legislation, we could have standards till the cows come home. My substantive position is an inspector with Canadian Food Inspection Agency. We have all kinds of regulations, but if there's no mandate to actually enforce them, then they mean nothing. So you can have standards, but if the health authority never actually physically walks in the building, it means nothing. So, you know, all of these things are things we need to look at. So, you know, there's connect up with the Manitoba Health Coalition, send a letter to your MP and your MLA, and start making some of those calls. And, you know, if you want more information, then when you sign on to the campaign, we will be more than happy to send you updates.
Thank you, Marianne. So if you can just pull up the slide so folks know our social media, how to find that. So for the MHC, so Manitoba Health Coalition, if you want to sign the petition for personal care homes or send the letter to your MLA, we have both options available to you through our website, as well as the letter writing campaign too for a Manitoba Seniors Advocate as well. I think that's also important. And then you click on over to PSAC and the Canadian Health Coalition to hit our federal MPs and ministers on this topic as well. And again, to stress Marianne's point, that in order to get action, to make change, that we all need to actually contact our elected representatives and remind them that we actually are the folks that they represent, and they should be listening to the folks that actually reside within their provinces and across Canada about what they want to see happening and as it relates to personal care homes and long-term care in Canada, and to ensure that Rivera is made public and we're not sitting here having to experience this again under the hands of Rivera. And so I know that there's been a lot of questions popping up. And so what we're going to do now is we have some great tech helpers tonight and assistants, if you will. There's so much more than that to me, but they will be giving us some questions that they're seeing all our attendees sending in. Marianne, you're more than welcome to stop sharing your screen, I think, if you wanted to. And Alana or Matt or Michelle, if you had a question that you wanted to pose to the panelists, now is the time.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Matt here. We've seen a common question that's come up a few times amongst people. There seems to be some questions about, you know, if Rivera is owned by PSAC members through the pension plan, you know, why can't PSAC just you know, not do this? So I know that we have with us James Infantino, who is a pension officer with PSAC, and I was hoping he might, you know, give everyone a brief background on how exactly the relationship is between, you know, PSC, their pension plan, and the Pension Investment Board, you know, to provide some background on who actually has authority over these issues.
James, if you wanted to also turn your
Sure, can
camera
you
on.
hear me?
We can hear you. If
Okay,
you wanted to.
great. Thank you very much for that question. It's a great question. It's come up several times in the question and answer session. The answer to that is PSAC members do contribute to PSP Investments. They're overseen by the Public Sector Pension Investment Board, and those pension investments go to buy a subsidiary or an operation like Rivera. The problem with this arrangement is that it is illegal for PSAC members to sit on the board of directors of the Public Service Pension Investment Board. It's not Manitoba. Your public pension funds in Manitoba, they're jointly administered. The union has a 50% say in the way those pension funds are operated. So if this was Manitoba and Rivera was owned by one of those public pension funds, that'd be a different question. But right now, under the Federal Public Service Pension Plan, the PSAC members are legally prohibited from participating in the management of PSP Investments. So that's the answer to that.
Thank you, James. And thank you for the questions. For those folks who remitted that particular question, because I think we're all kind of curious about that. Do we have another question?
We do. Hi, it's Michelle. We have several questions actually that focus on the role and the responsibility of the health authority. So in the interest of time, I'm going to try to put them into one global question. And Shannon, I think these are probably directed at you. Most of them came up when you were speaking. But the overall question is, shouldn't the health authority be responsible for the standards of care? And does the WRHA actually provide funding to private homes like Rivera? And what's the difference between WRHA and Rivera homes? Do you have some information on the distinctions? So I hope that makes sense as one big combined question, and I look forward to the answer.
I will do my best. So I'll try and to just do it in sections. So the first, or one of the questions was, does the WHA provide funding? Yes, they do. And it's connected to that 3.6 hours of care. There is funding connected to that. And the biggest difference, I think, between Rivera and the WRHA would be around accountability. Now, no one by any stretch is trying to suggest that the WRHA is perfect and, they run everything perfectly, but there's a public accountability that's connected when the government, vis-a-vis the WRHA, is in charge or running something. So there's we can call for more transparency more easily than if it's a private company, because if it's a private company, they have we have no recourse to get them to share their information with us, whereas we do with the WRHA, because it's a public entity. So there's a bit more for us to do the accountability, or try to get accountability from them. And then the third part, I think it was, sorry, Marianne, what was the third part?
Michelle, what was that third part of
or Michelle, sorry.
question?
Sorry, the third part was about the differences.
Okay. So the differences would be that it's the way that they are run in terms of when it's not for profit, it becomes about the care of the residents as opposed to about the bottom line. So that would be the biggest fundamental difference. And we talked about earlier that when it's about profit, they'll do everything they can to keep the staffing levels as low as possible, because it's all about profit for the stakeholders.
That was very well done there, Shannon, for that layered question. Matt, or who has the next question?
Hey, Brianne.
Oh, hi, Amanda.
So there was just a question, like a clarification on who and how decides where PSAC pension money is invested. Is there a criteria for investment? Is it just to make money, like even at the expense of seniors, citizens' health? Like, is there any criteria, essentially?
Is that directed then to James?
James and Marianne, I would say.
Okay.
Whoever wants to answer.
Well, I'll start. Well, first of all, the money is invested by PSP Investments, which is the operating arm of the Public Sector Pension Investment Board. So they were the ones who went out and purchased Rivera. In terms of guidelines, there are regulatory guidelines that they have to meet in terms of investments. Some are under some are by regulations, federal regulations, but they do have to invest in the best interests of the plan member. They have a legal fiduciary duty to do that. And so in the case of Rivera, they would say, if they were posed this question, is that they are in fact investing in the best interest of the plan members. So they have a legal fiduciary responsibility, and that's what they're doing. So that's one guideline for them.
Marianne, anything to add?
Yes, I'm just going to apologize. I am going to turn my camera off and just go audio. My Wi-Fi is getting wonky. You know, here's what I want to say. I think most of us that are in the federal plan, you know, we've never asked the question, you know, how it's being done. We just know that we have, you know, a good pension plan, a defined benefit pension plan. And, you know, you would think that there would be some standards, but, you know, honestly, I don't know if we had asked some of those questions. And so, you know, when all of this comes forward now, you know, I can say personally, you know, this doesn't sit well with me. This is not right. And so now we have to figure out how we can affect change, because they do give updates every once in a while to unions and other stakeholders, but it's an update. We have absolutely no authority in there. So, you know, we do what we always do well, and that's go after those who can make the decision, and that's our politicians. So they may be doing it because that's their standard, and you know, they're making money and that's what they've been told to do. What we're saying is it's time for us to say, yeah, that's not good enough anymore.
Thank you for that, both Marianne and James. Do we have another question ready?
Yeah, Matt here. And I mean, I guess various people could answer this one. It's sort of, there's two parts to it. One, you know, someone here asked, you know, are you saying that each person in personal care homes is only allocated 3.6 hours of care in a 24-hour period? And if so, where did this ridiculously low number come from? So that's the first part of it. Maybe Shannon would probably be the best person to answer that. And the second part from someone else was asking what the panelists think of the call to increase hours of care to 4 hours per resident per day. They note that there's various organizations across the country who've made that call and are wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Shannon, did you want to start, and I can also chime in on the last end question?
Absolutely. The 3.6 hours of care, again, it's connected more to funding. So basically what they're saying is all they're going to fund is for 3.6 hours of care per person. Where this number came from, that we don't know. They made this number, they created that number. So it's kind of a yes and no answer. Yes, it's ridiculously low. And yes, that's kind of what they're saying, except it's connected to the funding. Is not just, they don't expect that someone's going to only have 3.6 hours of care. They're kind of saying, you know, the site has to figure out how they're going to pay for that on their own, the rest of it. And then in terms of the call for the 4 hours of care, absolutely, CUPE is supportive of that. And in the letter that I mentioned that we had sent to the Minister of Health in June, we actually call for it to go to 4.1 hours per care, at least, that it needs to be increased to at least that. So we're absolutely supportive.
Yeah, and on the staffing ratios, the 4.1 is actually now deemed by both by Pat and Hugh Armstrong, who are leading experts on long-term care. They've run international studies on this topic, and in our webinar with them a few months ago, they were speaking that actually should be increased to 4.9 at this point in time, given the increased needs of residents that are now occupying long-term care facilities. And if you think 3.6 is low, in Alberta, I think it's at about 1.8, and I'm sure Sandra from Friends of Mandacare, who may be on this evening, would correct me, but it is also very low in other provinces as well. So I think that, and our 3.6 is in regulations, in guidelines, it's not in legislation. So there's also a distinction there. Another question?
This is this is a general question, and maybe this is for Shannon. But who has the responsibility to do the inspections of the personal care homes?
It would be public health under the WRHA or the government. So it's honestly, it's kind of been unclear about who actually is responsible for this, because everybody's saying it's them. No, it's them. So we believe it would fall under the government's auspice, so public health, and then the WRHA.
And on those, if there are inspections that are actually occurring, they're not making those reports public either. And so a big part of this is also transparency and seeing those reports. And the only way we knew some of the stories that were happening pre-COVID was through the media, through numerous FIPA requests and pressure to release some of those reports. The last time this was brought up to our health minister, he had made the claim, and TUPE was calling for the most recent reports to be made public, that they didn't know where to put them. And so I think that the excuses need to stop, the accountability needs to happen, and those reports need to be made public, and those inspections need to be happening more regularly. Another question?
Yep. We do. We have so many good ones. It's hard to decide which one to take next. This is a very good question, and one that we've heard asked in other forums. And that's, so making Rivera public would fall under the federal purview and not provincial? ? And I'm going to suggest that Marianne and maybe James would be well placed to answer this one. So making Rivera public would fall under federal, not provincial? ?
So I'll try the video thing again. It seems to be working a bit better. The issue right now is that the federal government in effect owns it. So what we're saying, because obviously they don't, we don't want the pension plan to just turn around and sell it to another corporation. We're saying that this needs to be public, and currently the provinces and territories are responsible for that. So what we're saying is transfer it to the provinces on the condition that it is transferred and becomes a public entity. And with that transfer comes the funding that's required for it. And James may have other information to add.
No, exactly, Marianne. I'll just add to that. Currently, in terms of long-term care facilities, Rivera operates in 4 jurisdictions in Canada: BC, Manitoba, Alberta, and Ontario. So again, as Marianne said, this is provincial jurisdiction. So we would have to negotiate with each of those jurisdictions for the long-term care facilities that they have within their provincial boundaries.
Thank you, both James and Marianne, for that. And next question, since we have so many good ones tonight. Not all at once.
Okay, wow. I did not think we were going to get back to my turn again. So here we go. So here's a question from Jim Silver. He's wondering if we have detailed information about Rivera. And James, I think I'm looking to you on this. Do we know who sits on the board, and do we have financial information about Rivera? You know, do all the profits from Rivera go to the pension plan, or are there other investors? And a general question on this is, and I guess this is for Marianne as well. Who should people be reaching out to put pressure on Rivera?
Okay, I'll start with some of the initial questions. First of all, the only thing, well, first of all, information like the board of directors, that's public information. So that's obtainable. You can get that. Actually, you can get that on the Rivera website. If you go to it, you can get that information. But in terms of financial information, the only thing we know about Rivera is that it's 100% owned by PSP Investments. That's the only thing we know. Forensic accountants can't get access to that information. It's not accessible through ATIP request because it's a priority information, privileged information. So that's not available. So that's the answer. Now, in terms of putting, well, perhaps I'll let Marianne, but Treasury Board is the minister or ministry responsible for PSP Investments. So we've been targeting, for the most part, the Treasury Board, President of the Treasury Board on this particular file.
Yeah, absolutely. So really that's our focus, because right now the pension plan is set up through legislation. So, you know, there needs to be a will of the government to be able to change this. Who has the ability to do that? It is our elected political leaders at the federal level. So it is every federal MP can do that. And then, so that, I mean, that's where we put the pressure. There's a lot of information we can't get. But I will tell you that as someone who pays in, I'm going to be asking for a whole lot more disclosure. But who has the ability to affect change on this? Federal government.
Great, thank you, both James and Mary Ann. And
hey, everyone. So we actually just got a question via text, and I'm not sure if we have this information or if we'll have to follow up with it. But if the question is, if Rivera goes public, what will the impact be on the public service pensions? I guess the question is, what proportion of the pension fund does Rivera comprise? Do we have any of those details?
I could take a guess at that. Well, not a guess, but an educated response to that. First of all, Rivera is already taken a hit. Its brand has already taken a hit. It's lost value. Who would invest in Rivera at these particular stages? And that would be the same for any of the profit operators. The other ones, Chartwell and Sienna, they've all, if you take a look at their shares, they're publicly traded companies, their shares have all fallen. So we've already taken a hit. Now, in terms of the value, again, we're focusing on long-term care facilities. We know Rivera as a whole, and they have many operations in the UK, in the United States, through Canada, through retirement residences. Again, we're focusing on long-term care facilities, but the value of the entire value of Rivera, we understand to be $3 billion. And the value of the pension fund, as Marianne said, is about $169 billion. But not all of that is in these Rivera long-term care facilities. They have other operations which we wouldn't consider part of this Make Revera Public campaign. So it's difficult to give an answer, but those are the parameters in terms of the numbers that we have.
okay, thank you for that, James. And also for folks to know, the Ontario Health Coalition has been really good in regards to information on Rivera. So I also encourage folks to check them out too on this topic. And Ontario has had some very problematic legislation recently passed as it relates to long-term care and the proliferation of profit within long-term care facilities. So we can't forget what's happening in different provinces as this unfolds, especially those who have been so adversely impacted. is Michelle next on a question?
I am. I have two questions, and these are both difficult questions. They're from June, who lost her mother at the Maples home, and from Jean, who lost her mother, and from Julie, who lost her aunt. And they have both asked pretty much the same question. What do you think the government should have done to help? Why didn't they call in the army? The Red Cross was not there for just over a week when my mother passed away. I don't understand how our government can allow our seniors to be treated so badly. And Pallister has refused to have the military come in. It's too late for many, including my aunt who passed away. But is there any information on how the military can be brought in as the deaths are continuing despite the Red Cross being brought in for extra help? Thank you for those questions. Those are difficult questions to ask.
So first, I think before any of us answers, I think we thank you for joining us tonight and for asking your questions. And we're very, very sorry about your losses, and our condolences to you both and everybody else again on this call who have joined us tonight. I know this particular question is being asked repeatedly during the healthcare press conferences that are happening. Scott Billick with the Winnipeg Sun is very consistent on asking this particular question, and we received the same answer, which is they have the Red Cross on side, and that's kind of good enough at this point in time. I think there were calls to bring in the military relatively early. If I think, yeah, Marianne's shaking her head, yes. So my memory is correct, and Shannon is. Thank you, folks. And it was ignored. And I think this is that really big piece for people to see that there is a clear distinction with what our elected officials are doing and what is actually needed at this point in time. And while we can't presume to know what they're thinking in regards to why they didn't, I think right now we need to be talking about what can we do right now to ensure the situation doesn't get worse. And if the military is our only option at this point in time, then we should really be calling them in for assistance. The federal government has been very clear with the provinces in regards to if they needed resources or they need help to let them know. Our province did seek assistance in Statistics Canada is helping with some of the contact tracing that's occurring. But I think the overall trend in this whole situation, including the personal care homes, is that we had a first wave that was relatively light on Manitoba due for a number of factors. And in that time, there was not significant planning that was taking place to avoid the situation that Shannon was talking about, the letter they had sent earlier on the behalf of QP. And so it's really about the lack of actions that took place in preparation for the second wave, and a reluctance and a resistance to listen to frontline workers and the families and caregivers to then take the steps that needed to be happen. If anybody else has any idea why they weren't listening to folks, please feel free, but it's really difficult, especially when I think it's also important to note that opposition parties, both the NDP and the Liberal Party, have been pressing the government on this particular issue as well, into which we haven't received a response even in that forum as well. So there's lots of questions and not enough answers from our government. And so that is why it's, again, I'm going to do the call to action for folks to contact your elected MLAs and MPs, and especially in the Manitoba context, to make sure that we're doing more for our personal care homes and getting the assistance in when we need it. And it was months ago. And so please contact every local representative that you have in relation to this. If anybody else had anything else to add on that particular question, again, I wish I knew why they wouldn't send in the military if they felt like that could help them, especially considering how strained for resources we are at this point in time in the pandemic.
Yeah, Brianne, it's James. As people in Manitoba may know or may not know, both the Army was brought in both Ontario and Quebec. Mm-hmm. And my understanding was it was done at the request of the province. Mm-hmm. Like the feds are just not going to enter. They need this. But what you may or may not also know, that in both cases the military filed reports, public reports, and they were absolutely horrid. Like and that was really bad publicity about what was happening there. So that may be part of the thinking of the provincial government there, that this may be a potential if this happens again. So, but anyways, that's what we understand.
And shame on them for not putting people first and doing their job and their responsibility as a governing body to make sure that people are protected, and especially our most vulnerable and our older adults who have built this province and should have the dignity and respect to ensure that their personal care homes are funded to the levels that they need and the staffing levels we need. So thank you for that, James. And do we have another question?
Bree, can I just add something
Sure.
to that, please?
Yeah, for
Sorry,
sure.
Okay. I know my audio is really acting wonky when my camera's on.
That's
Okay. I need to say this. We were in this position because this provincial government did not pay attention through the first wave. They got arrogant and went, look at Manitoba, we have no cases. When the health minister stood in front on a Sunday press conference and first of all lied to people and said he didn't know about it, but then when somebody said, whether it was him or the premier, was specifically asked, when was the last time an inspector was in that facility? There was no answer. So even as they watched everything happen in Quebec and Ontario in the first wave in the springtime, it never frickin' occurred to anybody in this government here that maybe it should be a priority to make sure that we have the resources here so that it doesn't happen here. And at the whole time when all of this stuff is happening, our premier's out doing a survey to say, oh, should we have a curfew? I'm sorry, this is, it just infuriates me, and it may or may not be appropriate for me to say all these things. But you know what? I listen to stories like Karen's story, like my friend's story, like other people. These are real people. Every day when they come out and do their update and they say we had this many cases and this many deaths, that's somebody's loved one. And when I see the premier and I see the health minister and I see the rest of the MLAs hiding and not saying anything or doing anything or taking any accountability, well, quite frankly, I don't have words that are appropriate for a public forum, shall I say. But I'm sorry, this has got to stop. They are accountable. They knew this was going to happen. They didn't put anything in place. One phone call, they could have had the military in there, but they're going to stand in front of the public and say, well, now is not the time. That's what they said. It's not the time yet. Look Karen in the face and tell her that. Look at the other, and again, for all the family members that are listening tonight, I mean, you know, I just want to say that, you know, it's important for you to tell your story, but it's also important for you, you know, to do what you have to do personally. People like me, we're on it. I'm sorry, I'll shut up now.
Thanks, Marianne. No, I think it's, I think we all have these feelings, especially Shannon, who has to hear from all these frontline workers who are sounding the alarm and have been sounding the alarm for ages. And then to be put in this situation, and again, all the families that have been adversely impacted and the folks who are still in the personal care homes. This topic is really important, and it's something that I know at times people feel like there's not a lot you can do, but there is. And part of that is reaching out to your elected folks. And I know that sometimes doesn't feel like a lot, but if we're all in this, we all have networks that we can share this information with. Make sure that you're reaching out to people you know and sharing what's important to you and why you're reaching out to your elected folks and why the treatment in personal care homes is not right, and we should be doing better by both our residents and their families and our frontline workers every day. And it's really important that we do. And I think that every voice helps. And if you are interested, please feel free to reach out to us at the Manitoba Health Coalition, at QP, at PSAC, in your own community groups. But the Manitoba Health Coalition is a big umbrella for folks who really care about the preservation and the expansion of universal public health care. And so please feel free to reach out to us and sign the petition, contact your MLA, contact your MP, talk to your friends, talk to your family about why this is important. The reality is, if we're so blessed to make it to our older years, some of us, that we want to ensure that there's something not just for us, but also our family members, and to make sure that system is in place so that this situation never occurs again. I do want to again thank everybody who's joined us today. Marianne, Karen, again, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. I think that's, again, I will reiterate, it's very brave to come out and to speak your truth. And I think that's something that needs to be valued, the lived experience and the truth. And to Shannon, you are a rock star in my eyes in a lot of ways for the work that you're doing and the folks that are on the ground and the work that they're doing. And it would be really refreshing for a change if our government would just open their ears to what's actually occurring. It's really important for us all to do our part again. And I know this pandemic has been hard on all of us in various ways, shapes, and forms. And we're all struggling in our own ways. But for all of us to ensure that we are all in this together, to stay home and to make sure you follow those fundamentals, but also part of this is springing into action and reaching out to your elected folks and reaching out to your community groups. And that is really what we want to impress upon people here tonight who are taking an interest on this topic, to please do this, because that is really our only option at this point in time. And so thank you. I'm conscious of the time. And so I want to thank everybody for joining us. I want to also thank our tech helpers, Alana, Matt, Michelle, James, for joining us for those technical pension questions. You're invaluable on that knowledge. And also to the questions that we weren't able to get to tonight, we'll try to field them to the appropriate person and get you a response as soon as we can. Please allow a couple of days for us to sort through that, because there are a number of them. And if you are, again, interested, we will be having webinars in 2021. And with that, I want to say thank you to everybody tonight. Please be safe, take care, and again, follow those fundamentals, stay home as much as you possibly can, and ensure that you wash your hands, wear a mask, physical distance, reduce your contacts. I will keep saying it until people do it. And so it's not that hard to put on a mask. And quite frankly, it does help. It's a tool in our toolbox. And without a vaccine available to us at this point in time, this is what we have. So thank you again for joining us. It has been a great night to be able to talk to everybody. And it's unfortunate it's under these circumstances. But thank you again, and everybody who attended, thank you for spending your evening with us. I hope you have a lovely night, and please, again, don't forget to reach out to your MLA, your MP, and make sure you also, if you are in social media, make sure you're also communicating with them via those platforms as well. As Shannon said, Twitter was a buzz after the incident with the Reddit post, and so that is an avenue to have your voice heard. So let's all do it together, folks.